Hi everyone, happy morning. Today's session we are going to talk about vSphere cluster features. So this is a session one. So we can cover the few features in today's session and the remaining cluster features will cover in the following sessions. Okay, so before we start our cluster features, let quickly update our vSphere master checklist. Let's say if you remember, usually we are following all the vCenter feature checklist. So in our previous session, we talk about the VMware converter, how we can convert physical to virtual and virtual machine to virtual. And initially we have some resource crunch issues and compatibility issue. Converter was failed. And later session, I show you how to convert V to V. It was went well when we meet all the converter pre-requirements. Okay, so let's make the converter portion is completed. Okay, even if you want to explore the any third-party tools also you can explore, not only VMware Converter, you can explore Microsoft P2V, any third-party tool also you can explore, like Platespin Migrate or Starwind Converter. Okay, and we also given some basic overview of VRA and VRO because it's a VRA and VRO is completely automation concept and it's a separate course. So once we familiar with all the vSphere concept, if you're interested, I will cover for the VRA in detail. So just for the basic level we covered. So let's make this as a completed. And in detail one, we can discuss at the end of the vSphere session. Okay. And today's session, we are focusing on the vSphere cluster features. So I just highlighted what is the features we are going to cover. So I will give some basic overview first, and in detail, we'll cover mainly today's vSphere DRS. Okay, this is the focus for today's session. But the remaining features, I will give the quick overview. What is importance of high availability, fault tolerance, and also the SRM. So hope you are following all the labs as per our discussion sessions. Okay, so let's back to the slide. So DRS is a distributed resource scheduler. This is one of the cluster feature and the DPM also cluster feature. DPM full form is distributed power management and vCLS means vSphere cluster services. This is also one feature. High availability. FT means fault tolerance and protecting data. Okay, so before we start the cluster features, let's try to understand the some real-time scenario. Once we imagine the real-time scenario, then we can easy to understand what is importance of all these features, why we are using these features in the vSphere level. So let's observe our agenda. Agenda is tiny organization rack diagram, physical and virtual infrastructure. I just took the one organization example. I will show you how the rack diagram it looks like and how we are going to manage the physical and virtual infrastructure. And vSphere infrastructure, what is the main challenges and what is the solutions for those challenges, and protection at every level. Every level means in every vSphere infrastructure layer, and I will show you the conceptual diagram. This diagram will understand what is importance of all these cluster features. Okay, and once we familiar with the real-time scenario, it's easy to dive into the vSphere clusters overview and vSphere DRS feature and DRS architecture and DRS enhancements. When we compare with our previous DRS editions, like until the vSphere 6 series, there was a DRS is usually do the load balancing technique. Even in the vSphere 7 also, we DRS also same functionality, load balancing technique, but there is some enhancements. What is those improvements we'll discuss today. And vSphere DPM. DPM means distributed power management, and we'll observe the DPM architecture as well. And vSphere clustering services. This is also one of the name itself says it's a clustering only. So it's a clustering feature only. And finally, we'll do the home lab for vSphere clusters. So today we'll mainly focusing on DRS and DPM, and the following sessions will cover the remaining features, HA and FT. These features will cover in the subsequent sessions. Okay. So let's talk about the first option. First agenda point is rack diagram. Excuse me. So tiny organization means very small organization. Normally, how the rack diagram looks like is this is a rack diagram, how it is looks like. And we'll talk about the physical infrastructure first. Once we familiar with physical, we'll go with a virtual infrastructure. Suppose if you notice the left side diagram, we have a two racks here, rack 1 and rack 2. And even in the rack, we have a few physical servers. If you observe in the first rack, we have a three physical servers. So three physical servers are, for our easy understanding, I mentioned a HPE boxes, three HPE servers. And even in the rack two, we have a seven HPE servers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 plus 3, total we have a 10 ESX servers in these two racks. And storage, I given rack one storage, and rack two also we have one storage. And within the rack one, we have a few switches, and rack two also have a switches. So that means in our any organization, we common requirements in the physical infrastructure is we require a servers, we require a storage and network devices. And even storage not only limited for a storage box, even we also buy some additional storage arrays whenever the existing storage is full. We require some additional storage arrays, and we also need a tape libraries. Tape libraries mainly use it to store old data, like archival data we can copy to the tape libraries. Even we can use tape libraries also comes under the storage section. And even network devices, not only the switches, we can also use network load balancer devices, network routers. We'll also use wireless routers, load balancer, firewall devices. These all comes under the network. But I just highlighted what is the main key components: compute, network, storage. So same scenario for rack 2 also. And even in our tiny organization, the minimum ESXi host, we need a 10 ESXi host, and roughly the virtual machines we can create 100 virtual machine. Let's say for our easy understanding, let's talk about within the 10 ESXi host, we divided into two racks. That means three ESX host in one rack and seven ESX host in rack 2. That means rack 1 represent as a test and development cluster, and the rack 2 represent as a, logically it's represent as a production cluster. So 7 ESXi hosts dedicated for all our production virtual machines, and rack 1 dedicated for our test VM, development VM, and also management VMs. Suppose if your organization size is big, when the organization size is big means our ESXi host count will be increased to 100, and virtual machine count also increase. During that time, what we can do is, for test servers, we maintain separate rack, development servers, separate rack, and production server, there will be a n number of racks. That is only the difference, but the concept wise, it's the same for tiny organization, small organization, large organization, and so on. Okay. And now, as a vSphere infrastructure administrator, we know how to install the 10 ESX servers. We already familiar how to install ESX configuration, and ESX management. If your ESX count is more than 2, and what is the recommendation to manage ESX server is vCenter server. So we know how to manage 10 ESX servers through vCenter server, and we are familiar to create virtual machines. Even today, if we give the task to create 100 virtual machine, first we can ask our customer what is the requirements for 100 VMs, how many Windows servers, how many Linux servers, and any other operating system servers. So based on the customer requirement, 100 VMs, let's say customer given as a two flavors, Windows and Linux, and they required 50 Windows servers, 50 Linux servers. So 50 Windows, 50 Linux means obviously it's a, if your project is very new project, customer prefer to choose a latest operating system. So Windows latest operating system, Windows 22, and the Linux latest operating system is Red Hat 8.6. So the relevant 8 series, Red Hat 8 series, you can download the ISO, Microsoft latest ISO you can download, and create one fresh virtual machine for Windows 1 VM and Linux 1 VM, and you can install the operating system and make that virtual machine as a master template. Using the master template, you can deploy all your required 50 virtual machines for each flavor of OS. So Windows 50 VMs and Linux 50 VMs. Totally 100 VMs we can deploy using a template. So until now, we are familiar how to install a ESX and how to deploy a virtual machines from template. Okay, so this usually in the real-time scenario, they will use some naming terminology. When you are installing ESX host freshly and creating virtual machine in the initial stage, project initial stage, normally there is a project manager. He will prepare the entire project plan, even if it is a small organization or it is a large organization. The concept is same. Only the infrastructure size only different, but the entire technical concept is same. Now, the project manager created a plan for 10 ESXi hosts and 100 virtual machine. Normally in the real-time scenario, this one we call it as a day zero, day one activities. Day zero means our project starting stage, day zero. Day zero means normally project managers and solution architects, they will prepare a design for your project. That is considered as a day zero. And day one is nothing but a, for this project, day one is nothing but a implementation activities. So implementation means installing the ESX host, configuring, managing, vCenter install, configure, manage, and also deploying the virtual machine. This is the implementation stage. We call it as a day one. Now comes to the operations. Operations in IT environment, the usual terminology is day two. Day two means our project already implemented. The day two is nothing but our regular operations. So as a vSphere administrator, your ESXi hosts are ready, virtual machines are ready. So what is your regular day-to-day jobs? So our day-to-day jobs is we have to provide a protection for all your ESXi host, virtual machines. Not only vSphere infrastructure, we have to provide a protection to physical. That is the responsibility for day two operations engineer, or we can say technical consultant. So as a vSphere technical consultant, we should be provide a protection for your infrastructure, both the physical infrastructure and virtual infrastructure. So for sample scenario, I given a question here. So how do we provide protection? Protection means either security or safety. How do we provide a safety for physical and virtual infrastructure? This is our responsibility to provide a safety to the both physical and virtual infrastructure. The physical and virtual infrastructure, I just highlighted the very key components. So similar scenario applicable for any of the additional sub components like hardware components. Hardware component means it includes a server. Even inside the server, there is some hardware peripherals. If any CPU fail or memory fail or disk fail, any of the hardware peripheral components are failed, that is also comes under the our vSphere technical consultant responsibility. For example, all of the sudden my HPA server memory got error message. So memory become a memory performance degrade error, or memory DIM module, dual inline memory module become as a faulty. So is normally servers hardware device means anytime it can faulty. Same like our laptop. So our laptop we can work for 1 year, 2 years smoothly, but after at a certain time, at any time we may find some laptop keyboard issue or monitor display issue, or some hard disk is going giving a lots of noise. So many issues in a laptop, in our home PC laptops. Same scenario for our production servers also. When we are using in a regularly for long hours, 1 year, 2 years of servers, there is a chances of hardware component errors. So during that time, as a vSphere technical consultant, our main responsibility is you can just read the error message. What is that hardware error message? So then you can contact your respective hardware vendor. For example, in this stack diagram, I given the vendor name is HPE server. This is a symbol of HPE. So Hewlett Packard Enterprise. So when you find a hardware issue, we need to raise a request, or you can raise a call to the HPE technical support, and you can request raise your provide your server serial number. They will raise one request for you. So using that serial number, when they raise the request, they will come on site and they will help you to troubleshoot your hardware component. But our vSphere technical consultant, our main role is coordination part. We need to identify the server name, server serial number, and what is the error message. This information you can call to the HPA technical support team, and they will come and resolve the hardware issue. Okay, that is a one type of safety what we are providing in a hardware level, physical layer. And how about storage and network? Storage and network, normally we no need to bother about storage and network, because in the organizations for the storage, we have a separate storage engineers, and network there will be a separate network engineers. So network engineer will take care of network equipment. For example, this network equipment is Aruba vendor. So Aruba switch, they will contact the Aruba vendor. And even storage, this is a nimble storage. If there is any challenges in the nimble storage, they will contact the respective vendor. And even I give an example as HPE, not only HPE, any other companies. Like if you have IBM server, we have to contact the IBM. And your storage is Hitachi storage, we need to contact the Hitachi. vendor. And if your switches are Cisco switches, we need to raise a call to the Cisco switches. But network and storage, we need to bother. The respective team will take care of the physical layer safety. But now coming to our vSphere technical consultant, main key focus areas. Our key focus area is second item, which is ESXi host. So whenever ESXi host is down, that is our responsibility. Now let's imagine in our ESXi host, each host is running with a 10 virtual machines. So we have a 3 ESXi hosts, let's say even the same example, 10 ESXi hosts, 100 virtual machines. That means roughly one host is maintained with a 10 virtual machines. For example, ESXi 1 is down. So down means there is a hardware issue or ESX host OS corrupted or suddenly network got disconnected, whatever it is. But when the ESX is down, let's think about 10 virtual machines also down and the users are unable to access those 10 virtual machines. So what is the impact to the production? Definitely there will be a huge impact to the production. If your 10 virtual machines are pointing to the any internet websites, the entire website will not be accessible for some time until we resolve the ESXi host. So we should take care of our ESXi host, how we can provide a high availability feature. And also sometime not only high availability feature, even ESXi host load will be high. CPU memory is completely consuming over 80% or over 90%. So we should take care of the ESXi host performance issues. We should take care of ESXi host server down issues. Okay, so that safety we need to provide on a ESXi host level. And to provide the ESXi host high availability and load balancing, it require a cluster features HA and DRS. So if you enable HA and DRS, it will help you to resolve the load balancing. It will help you to resolve when the ESXi host is unexpectedly down. We no need to bother about 10 virtual machine. HA will automatically migrate and restart on another ESX host. So that means there is a minimal impact, but the impact is very less impact. It's not a huge impact using a high availability feature. Suppose some customers say, even I don't want that minimal impact. I need a complete 100% availability. During that scenario, we have to use another latest cluster feature, which is fault tolerance. Normally, high availability will provide a availability for only for the 99.99% availability. If you need a 100% availability with zero downtime, during that time we can use, instead of HA, you can use a fault tolerance. But obviously VMware giving 100% availability means fault tolerance require a additional license feature, which is vSphere Enterprise Plus. Okay, these licensing features also I will explain clearly in the following class. Once we understand all the features, then it's easy to understand what is the difference in Enterprise Plus license feature and Enterprise features. Suppose if your customer do not have a Enterprise Plus license, then we can stick with a high availability feature. When the ESX host is down, we may expect minimal downtime, but the availability is 99%. Okay, that 1.1% may be down. But in the FT, it's a guarantee from the VMware that it will provide 100% availability. Okay, and suppose for the load balancing, we'll use the feature called DRS, Distributed Resource Scheduler. Let's back to the slide. ESXi host, and this is about the ESXi host protection mechanism. And how about networking layer? Networking and storage we can skip because it's a physical device taken care by respective network team and storage team. But as a vSphere technical consultant, our main responsibility is our ESXi host networking and vCenter distributed switches. So vSwitch and distributed switch, again it's our responsibility. And in the storage also, data stores maintenance, data stores responsibility is vSphere, and the physical LUNs storage array is taken care by storage team. Okay, I repeat, physical network part taken care by networking team, but the virtual switch, distributed virtual switch is taken care by our vSphere technical consultants. And storage level also, physical storage is taken, storage arrays and all tape library is taken care by storage team. But when it comes to the ESX vSphere vCenter data stores, vCenter whatever the data stores we have, those data store space issues and all must taken care by our vSphere engineers. And even virtual machines, we have to provide as a protection for the VMs also. VM power on, VM power off and all is a normal operation. But when the VM is unexpectedly power down or it is not able to boot up, that protection status also we have to take care. And guest OS level issues. Guest OS level issues, Windows level, Windows system down or Linux system down, that is also our responsibility. Normally, the small scale organizations, operating system maintenance is taken care by vSphere technical consultant. If your organization is a large organization, for Windows also there is a separate team, Linux also separate team. Our responsibility, core responsibility only on the virtual layer. And application layer, even application layer also, we have to coordinate with the application team. And the data protection also taken care by storage team. But if they are using any vSphere tools, we need to involve for a data protection also. And the entire data center, even to provide entire data center also, we have to use some tools to provide a entire data center protection. So those areas, what is the key tools used for data protection and entire data center and all, we'll discuss today in the following slides. Hope you understand this point. We are responsible to provide the protection for all these components. If you have any question in this point, let me know. If no questions, we can move on to the next slide. See, vSphere infrastructure challenges and solutions. So as we know, I given the rack diagram example for tiny organization, and same scenario applicable for small 100 ESX host, 1000 virtual machine, and medium scale organization. We already discussed this point. So I'm just recalling. So 400 ESX, 4000 VMs, large also same, 1000 ESX, 10,000 VMs, and extra large organization, 2000 ESX host and 35,000 virtual machine. But the organization says whatever the size it is, the most common challenges are I just highlighted here. So let's talk about the first challenge. ESXi host has down unexpectedly and it causes production VMs down. So what is a solution to reduce the downtime for the virtual machines? And the customer is asking for penalty for virtual machines down or due to business impact. Obviously, if we virtual machines down for some time, definitely we have to provide some penalty to the customer. Let's say your customers is maintaining some website online, any booking system, or let's say customer is a travel customer. So travel customer means they have some travel booking websites in the online. If the server is down for some time, roughly 30 minutes, so 30 minutes that online transaction will be hold. So online transaction loss means definitely there is a huge business impact to the customer. They will ask they will returnly they will ask a penalty because they are paying monthly some amount to provide a safety, or we are providing a 100% availability to the customer virtual machines. So when we doesn't meet our SLA, service level agreement, normally service level agreement is means it is an agreement between client and customer. So our customer and client may have the agreement SLA, we have to provide a 100% availability for virtual machine. But some customer what they say is production VMs we need 100% availability, and for test and development VMs, even there is a minimal downtime also, they are okay to agree. And also, if you are providing for 100% availability, obviously we need to buy a vSphere latest enterprise plus license features. Then only we can able to provide a 100% availability. So this is also one challenge. Customer will keep ask if there is any VMs down, they will ask for penalty. And application owners also require 100% availability for critical virtual machines. It's not for all VMs, only for critical virtual machines. And this is one challenge. And if you want to resolve this scenario, how we can fix this first challenge is there is a solution for the first all these three challenges. The solution from vSphere is we have to use vSphere high availability and fault tolerance. As discussed, high availability is providing a 99.99 percentage availability, and if you are using fault tolerance, it's providing a 100% availability. So to address these three challenges, so in our vSphere cluster, we need to enable HA and DRS. HA is available on a cluster level, fault tolerance is enabled on a virtual machine level. Okay, so this is the first solution. And let's talk about the second point. So second point is not only the ESX host down and all, we should also responsible for the insufficient resources on at ESXi host level. Insufficient resources, we can also call it as resource crunch. So here resource means ESX host to CPU, ESX host memory, disk, and NIC. So there is a chances most of the time network card there will be no performance issues, but some scenarios we may found network level also there will be a resource crunch. Bandwidth utilization may be high. But in the CPU utilization over 80%, memory utilization over 80%, disk utilization over 80%. These all considered as a resource crunch. So if there is any ESXi host resource performance issues, that is also our customer's challenge. We have to address the challenges. And ESXi host resources are underutilized, not only overutilized. Resource crunch, we can also call it as overutilized. That means resource is over 80%, over 90%, overutilized. And even there is some issue, some customers say resources are underutilized, below the 50%, below the 40%. Even underutilized also one challenge. Why we purchase so much huge investment on ESX, but my ESX host is completely underutilized. So what the solution you will give? That is also one challenge. And unable to meet SLAs. SLA means service level agreement. Normally, service level agreements are only for availability layer and performance layer. These two are considered as a metrics. So SLA metrics are mainly availability means HADFT, and the performance metrics are resource crunch or either overutilized or underutilized. Any scenario is considered as a performance metrics. But this scenario, we have to provide a solution to the customer. When the customer is approached us, my ESX hoster overutilized or my ESX hoster underutilized, we have to give some solution. That solution is Vsphere DRS. DRS means distributed resource scheduler, and even DRS also cluster feature. While creation of cluster, we need to enable a DRS feature. And within the DRS, there is one additional feature in the DRS that is called DPM. DPM means distributed power management. Normally, DRS will use for a resource crunch scenario, and for underutilized scenario, will use for a DPM. Same like previous. HA will use for a with minimal downtime. For 100% will go for a FT. So same scenario here for performance. Over performance means we need to use DRS feature for load balancing technique, and DPM will use for a underutilized scenario. Okay. Now let's talk about the third challenge. So third challenge is virtual machines down unexpectedly. Above we talk about ESX, but in the third solution, third challenge, we are talking about virtual machines down unexpectedly. It causes data protection. Your VM is completely corrupted, but the customer is facing the issue. They are unable to access their data. They say, even I don't need my virtual machine at present. I need at least the data. Same like our mobile phone. Even when your mobile phone is having some screen issues or anything, if your mobile is not able to boot up, first we think about our mobile data only. What is the contact numbers and our personal data? What is stored in the mobile? That data only more important than equipment. So same scenario for virtual machine also. Even the virtual machine down, our customer is not consider about the VM down scenario. They will main consideration is data. What is my data? So where we can restore the data. So obviously the solution for data corruption scenarios, the solution is always we need to maintain a backup for our production virtual machines daily basis, weekly basis, and monthly basis. So that means daily they will take the daily backup and weekly backup, monthly full backup, and yearly also they will maintain some annual backups also. So these and all we can follow, but in the from the vSphere perspective, VMware also giving some solution data how we can protect the data. But instead of using VMware data protection tool, it's our customer choice. Some customer they may stick to the VMware data protection tool. Some customers they will use some third-party backup tools like a Veritas Net Backup, Commvault, VMware Veeam Backup, and they may go for any of the external third-party backup tools. But from the vSphere perspective, we have to learn any backup tool is providing from a VMware level. So that tool is the solution for this third challenge. Not only for virtual machine down scenario, even the entire your data center you got some disaster happen. Let's say there was some earthquake in the data center area. The entire servers are completely disconnected. Your network is lost. So during that disaster scenario, how we can recover your entire data center, or we can say entire data center site, how we can recover? Even VMware has to provide some solution for when your complete data center down, not only the host level, not only the VM level, entire data center having some connectivity issue. So during that scenario also, we have to provide some disaster recovery plan, and this disaster recovery plan in a site level, even for application and business process level, we call it as business continuity plan, in short form BCP. And sometime to avoid the disaster recovery scenarios, they every company they maintain some annual power shutdown or annual DR exercises BCP plan, even to do your test on a entire site. Let's say for example there is no disaster, but company may maintain some standards. Every year they will do some disaster recovery tests. Now usually they will for annual basis. Yearly one time they will do disaster recovery test. Entire site is done, are we able to recover our data center successfully or not? Because we are not aware when the environmental issue may come. Okay, so it's not in our nature. Sometimes it's a naturally also there will be some power shutdown or power outage, anything can happen. So during that scenario, how we can recover and all the DR plan and BCP plans. So VMware also providing some solutions. So that solution is vSphere replication and SRM. vSphere replication is for a data protection level. It will help you to replicate your data from one data store to another data store, or one array to another storage array. That is a storage level data restoration. Suppose my entire data center, entire site, DR and BCP, we have to use the another tool name called SRM. SRM means Site Recovery Manager. This Site Recovery Manager will provide you protection for your entire data center protection. But as a vSphere engineer, we have to learn what is the features available from VMware. But in the real-time scenario, it's subjected to be customer's choice. Customer may use replication SRM, or they may use any third-party tool. Okay, but from VMware perspective, we have to learn what is the features available from VMware side. So in the next slide, whatever we discuss the challenges and solution, I will show you the conceptual diagram for these challenges and solutions. So this is the vSphere protection at every level. So this is the conceptual diagram. Let's talk about the conceptual diagram one by one. Let's start from bottom. Suppose if you see the bottom one, I highlighted as a components. Components means the mainly hardware peripherals and components. I took the example of storage switches and network cards. This is also considered as a hardware components. And also the server means our ESXi host servers, and storage means our main focus is data stores only. Okay, and data means our virtual machines data, and also the site, our entire data center complete site. Okay, even within complete site also we are just focusing on the vSphere site platform only, and the network layer in detail storage devices and all is taken care by separate teams. Our main focused area I highlighted here. So protection at every level, conceptual diagram. The first one, the components, we already know this concept. When we have a multiple NICs, we can able to configure NIC teaming. NIC teaming means network interface card teaming, grouping of multiple NIC card. The purpose of NIC teaming is whenever one NIC card is down, there will be no production impact, and we can able to access from another NIC card. But the solution is whatever the network card is having some faulty, we need to get it replaced through hardware vendors. Okay, that is also our responsibility. So that is a protection we are providing in the NIC level using NIC teaming. And the storage level, let's say we have a multiple storage switches. How we can provide the protection at the storage level is, the example is storage multipathing. Okay, even the network level, we know the some security policies. So security policies are MAC address changing and forward transmit mode. These are all the promiscuous mode. These are all the security policies for a network level. Similarly, we also have a multi-pathing connection policies in the storage level. So can anyone remember the storage path selection policies? We have the three storage path selection policies, that is fixed, MRU and round robin. So even these three policies also will help you to provide a protection during the multi-pathing connection. Okay, so that policy can be defined automatically, depends on our storage vendor configuration. Okay, so that is about the first section. And let's talk about the second section. Even in the server layer, the physical server is two ESXi hosts is running with multiple virtual machines. And to balance the load on the ESXi host level, we'll use the DRS concept. And for a underutilized scenario, we'll use DPM. Overutilized scenario, we'll use DRS, Distributed Resource Scheduler, and Distributed Power Management. Let's say my ESX host is completely down. During that scenario, we'll use the feature called vSphere high availability, and to provide a 100% availability, vSphere fault tolerance. So that is a server section. Let's come to the storage section. Even in the storage section, ESXi host, we know how to create VMFS data store, NFS data store, vSAN, and virtual volumes. I took the example of VMFS storage. Whenever your data store is completely overloaded, so when the storage is overloaded, what is the solution we provide is we will migrate your virtual machine from one data store to another data store. That means that is also the manual storage vMotion. Even in the DRS also, if you do not have DRS feature, we'll use a manual feature vMotion. Whenever the ESX host is overloaded, we'll manually migrate VM from ESX1 to ESX2. But to automate the vMotion feature, we need to use DRS feature. And same way, in storage vMotion is applicable on a not only the ESX level, it is on a data store level. Whenever any data store is full, we have to move your virtual machine using storage vMotion from one data store to another data store. The same scenario applicable during the store data store level maintenance also. Even if you are doing some maintenance on one of the data store, during that time also you can use storage vMotion. How the vMotion have automated feature DRS, even the storage vMotion also have a automated feature that is called storage DRS. Even storage DRS feature we'll discuss in detail in the following classes. And in vSphere, not only the storage vMotion feature, we have some additional features like vSphere replication, or you can use a third-party backup solution. So VMware original tool, VMware actual official tool is replication. You can use replication tool to replicate your data from one data store to another data store, or you can use a third-party backup solutions to take the backup of all your virtual machine to another data store. Whenever any virtual machine is down, you can restore from your backup. And the tool name also call it as vSphere Data Protection. So data protection mainly used for backup, and replication is mainly used for replication of data from one storage array to another storage array. That storage array can be in a same office or it will be in a remote office. Okay, that is how we'll provide the protection on storage level and data level. Now let's talk about the site level protection. How we can provide the site level protection is, let's say within my site, I have a multiple racks. It is running with ESXi host and n number of virtual machine. So if there is any site unexpectedly down, there is some earthquake or any natural disaster happen on a entire site. So if you are using a site recovery manager tool, this tool will always replicate your data from primary site to secondary site. So in case of any disaster happen on your primary site, we can restore your data from secondary site. So during this process, the VMware providing product name called Site Recovery Manager. This will help. The name itself says Site Recovery Manager. So entire site can be recovered in case of any disaster happen on entire site. Okay, and the finally the vSphere end goal is make it possible to reduce planned downtime. So the only thing is reduce the planned downtime using high availability and fault tolerance, and prevent unplanned downtime. Even if there is unexpectedly there is a ESX down, it is also preventing using HA and fault tolerance. We can prevent the unplanned downtime and recover rapidly from outages. So if there is any outage happen, we can recover using vSphere replication, data protection, or if it is in a site level corruption outage, we can recover using SRM. So as a vSphere systems engineer, we need to provide the protection for every layer. So before we dive into the each and every topic, today we'll focus on a DRS, because few concepts we already discussed: how we can provide nick teaming, storage multipathing, vMotion, storage vMotion, we are familiar. So we are going to concentrate today on DRS and DPM, and following sessions will focus on HA, FT, replication, data protection, and other solutions. Okay. So now, before we start the DRS, let's try to understand the vSphere clusters overview. So within the vSphere cluster, how we can create vSphere cluster. We are aware. Log into the data vCenter server. First, create a data center. After creation of data center, you can create multiple clusters. Suppose in this diagram, I created here 3 clusters for our easy understanding. The first cluster name is Management Cluster 01, Production Cluster 01, and Test and Development Cluster 01. So these 3 clusters, suppose in future, our usually the cluster will support maximum ESXi host, 94 hosts. You already reached the 94 host limit. In future, you can create a management cluster 02, production cluster 02, test and development cluster 02. So the naming convention will be based on your convenience. I am given one example. Any name you can keep for a cluster name. Okay. And the vSphere cluster, the main purpose of the cluster is a cluster is used in vSphere to share physical resources between a group of hosts. Even if you see the cluster icon, this is looks like this, grouping of multiple hosts. So whatever you group, let's say minimally I group a 3 ESXi host, that grouping of the 3 ESXi host resources will be comes on a cluster level. So whatever the host you have, all the host CPU will be combined here, available CPU, all the host combined memory and combined storage. Okay. And vCenter server manages cluster resources as a single pool of resources. We can create one or more clusters based on the purpose each cluster must fulfill. So each cluster I given example, same like in the diagram, management, production cluster, and test and development cluster. So the naming convention, you can use any naming convention. I given just example. Okay. And within the vSphere cluster, we'll also observe that what is the maximum configuration limits. So this is we are familiar. When we create a cluster, we can enable one or more cluster features. If you see the right side diagram, while creating the new cluster itself, you can find the features for DRS, HA, and vSAN. vSAN we already configured in our previous sessions. How to configure vSAN means during the cluster creation only we'll find these features. So today we'll enable a DRS feature also. Okay, and within the new cluster creation will he receive these 3 features: DRS, HA, and vSAN. So DRS is mainly for virtual machine placement and load balancing, and high availability mainly for high availability. That means continuous availability for virtual machines. And vSAN, we already know virtual SAN is mainly for shared storage, and it is a software defined storage. But how we can configure software defined storage is when you enable the cluster with vSAN feature, we can configure a shared storage. And we can also manage ESXi host updates using the images. Within a cluster, there is a feature called manage all hosts in the cluster within a single image. That feature also we can enable. This will help you. All your cluster ESXi hosts must maintain a same ESXi host build version, like ESX 7.0 update 3. All hosts should be updated with a same image. To maintain the unique build numbers or unique baseline versions, we need to enable this feature. And even after enable this feature, to update all your ESXi hosts, let's say there is some hosts are running with old version. To update that one, we need to use the tool name called vSphere Lifecycle Manager. This lifecycle manager, it will help you. We can update all the hosts in a cluster collectively using a specified ESX image. Okay. And within the cluster, what is the maximum limits are host per cluster is 96. This 96 count is applicable from 7.0 U1 onwards, update 1 onwards. But in the previous scenario, until the 7.0 general availability version, our ESXi host maximum per cluster is only 64. But in the recent latest versions, we can use maximum 96 hosts we can add within a cluster. Okay, this information, as we know, it's exported from the VMware configuration guide. And virtual machines per cluster, it's supported for 8,000 virtual machines. Virtual machines per host means per ESXi host 1024 virtual machines, and FT virtual machine. FT means fault tolerance enabled VMs per cluster is 98. Fault tolerance enabled virtual machines per cluster. How many CPUs it supported is 256 CPUs. Okay, this FT concept we'll discuss in detail in the following sessions. So now it's the time to focus on the DRS, distributed resource scheduler. In short form, we call it as a DRS. So until now, we are discussing the DRS means it's a load balancing. Now we can log into our lab and we'll observe what is the key concept of DRS. So vSphere Drs is a cluster feature that helps improve the resource allocation across all the hosts. Even if you see in this diagram, we have a 3 physical servers. On top of 3 physical servers, we install a ESX operating system. When we create a cluster, all the aggregation of resources, that means combination of ESX resources will make it as a one combination logical resource pool. Within this pool, the purpose of DRS is it will automatically balance the load on across this ESX host using vMotion technique. So the same point I highlighted in the description. So it aggregates combination of computing capacity across the collection of servers into logical resource pools. And the DRS is a technology that monitors load and resource usage. Will use vSphere vMotion to balance virtual machines across the hosts in a cluster. Okay. In other words, in simple term, how we can say is DRS uses vSphere vMotion functionality to migrate virtual machines. Let's say ESX1 is completely utilized. It will migrate VM from ESX1 to 2. Same way, if ESX3 is completely overloaded, it will move the virtual machine from ESX3 to ESX2. So this will be automatic mechanism when we enable a DRS feature. And for your easy understanding, let's talk about the DRS architecture now. See, this is the DRS architecture. It will give you the complete idea on how it will work. See, DRS generation generates migration recommendation based on how aggregate it has been configured. For example, if you see in the left side diagram, you can see 3 ESXi hosts on the left side. The figure is showing as unbalanced. Unbalanced means ESX1 running with the 6 virtual machines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 VMs, and ESX2 running with only 1 VM, and ESX3 is running with 2 virtual machines. So the resources are not in a balanced manner. It is considered as a unbalanced manner. But in the ESX1 has 6 VMs and resource might be overused. So resource will be overused on ESX1, and while ample sufficient resources are available on ESX2 and 3. So 2 and 3 is completely free. And DRS, what it will do is it will migrate the VMs from ESXi host 1 to ESX host 2 and 3. But migration means it will automatically use the vMotion technique to migrate to ESX2 and 3. So the right side diagram, I'll just show the right side diagram now. See, this is the right side diagram. How it is balanced is earlier it was in a 6 VMs. Now the 6 VMs means 2 VMs shifted to ESX2 and 1 VM shifted to ESX3. So it's already migrated. When you see the left side one, it is showing as unbalanced manner. When you see the right side manner, each host running with the 3 VMs, completely balanced infrastructure. But how it is balanced is when you enable DRS, the properly load balanced configuration of the host, that results appear. Okay, this is the importance of DRS architecture. I given an example of 3 ESXi hosts. Even if you have 96 hosts in your cluster, the resource will be balanced like this using a DRS feature. But if you do not have a DRS feature, every time we manually migrate VMs is like a very tedious job. So it's not recommended to do manual migration. We always recommend to enable DRS feature. Okay, this is the DRS architecture. Now we'll talk about the DRS use cases. In which scenarios we'll use a DRS. So DRS use cases are vSphere DRS used in the following situations. one scenario is initial placement of virtual machine when it is powered on. Let's say in my ESXi host, I have each host have 4 VMs, 12 VMs are running. When we are trying to power on one virtual machine, which host it's need to power on, that is taken care by DRS. That is the first use case. And second use case, load balancing technique. So just now we discussed in the architecture, the load balancing is taken care by DRS. And migrate VMs when the ESXi host in a maintenance mode. Suppose I want to do some maintenance on my ESXi host 1. When you place the host into maintenance mode, we no need to migrate VMs manually. DRS will migrate automatically to another ESXi host. Another ESX host means wherever the resources are available. Okay, and the DRS can be used in three ways: fully automated, partial automated, manual. Normally manual means we have to migrate the VMs manually. Partially automated means only the some area only automated, remaining we have to do manual approval recommendation. And the fully automated means the where DRS acts recommendations automatically. So usually the customers will go for a fully automated feature, but in some cases we may go for a partially automated or manually automated. Okay, this is about the DRS use cases. So before we dive into the DRS in detail concept, let's log into our lab. I will show you how to enable a DRS feature. Let's say I connected to our lab system. You see here in this diagram, we have a multiple clusters. When you select the data center, you can see the clusters, or in the right side, go to the host and clusters tab. We have a host tab, clusters tab. When we select the clusters tab, you will see cluster names. Let's say our YouTube channel name, Gnan Cloud Garage Cluster, and any name you can put. Just for our easy understanding, the naming convention is not a matter. Any name you can use. For our easy understanding, I created three main clusters: management cluster 1, production cluster 1, and test and development cluster 1. Suppose your cluster is already filled with 96 hosts, then you can create another management cluster 01. So cluster creation, we are already familiar. I will show you again how to create a cluster. Right click the data center and you can choose new cluster. When we select the new cluster, see it is showing as new cluster name. So any name we can keep. Let's say, for example, I'm creating the name as a production cluster 2. We already have production cluster 1. I'm taking the name as a production cluster 2. And it is going to create it now data center 1. And the cluster features are DRS, HCA, and virtual SAN. So today we are enabling a DRS feature. Okay. And even if you click on information icon, you will find DRS. When we enable DRS, it will automatically taking care of host monitoring is enabled and admission control enabled. VM monitoring is disabled. We can enable the VM monitoring also. So this is the default features when we enable this option. Suppose I disable, when we click here, the information is common for enable or disable. But the purpose of DRS is it will help you to monitor your host status. So enable the DRS. And also these services will have a default settings. This can be changed later in the cluster quick start workflow. Okay, and the image also, even manage all hosts in the cluster with a single image. Single image means ESXi host 7.0 update 3, all your hosts in a update 3 image. If you have any imbalanced image like ESX 7.0 update 1, it, while doing the update, you can do either manual update or you can do a LCM. Using LCM, you can do a automatic update method. Okay, so that scenario will enable this option. So compose a new image or import image from a existing host or import image from a new host. Any method we can import. So at present we are not using the LCM. So I just uncheck, and the information also, if you click information, it will provide the same description here. So now click on next. Excuse me. We are creating a new cluster. Production cluster 2 is creating under the data center. So DRS feature is enabled and remaining features in a disabled state. Now click on finish. See, production cluster 2 is created. So when you create the cluster, select the cluster, go to the configuration tab, and you can see the cluster services are DRS and availability. When you select the DRS, you can see DRS by default is comes with a fully automated. This fully automated only I explained in the slide. DRS can be used in three ways. One is fully automated. So this fully automated and even migration threshold, these all points we'll discuss now one by one. So before discussing these points, let's observe on another cluster also. Suppose the another cluster, see the vSphere DRS is showing us turn off state. If you want to enable, just click on edit or right click the cluster, go to the settings and enable the DRS features. So edit and just enable the DRS feature. Now click on OK. When you enable DRS, the turn off state will become as a turn on. You will get all these features. So same scenario for other clusters also. So we'll quickly enable DRS for other clusters. So management cluster 1, here also DRS is off state. Click on edit and turn on the DRS. And even the production cluster 2, just now we enable the DRS, and production cluster 1, edit and turn on the DRS. And test and development cluster also off state, you can enable a cluster. Click on OK. So when you go to the data center and you can see all the clusters are configured, and even in the DRS column, you will see all are in a enabled state. DRS is in a enabled state, but HA is disabled. We'll enable the HA also in the next class. Okay, but in the first cluster, both features are enabled. But the thing is there is no ESX host. That's why the resource is showing us 0 CPU, 0 memory, 0 storage. But where we have the ESX host is only on the management cluster 1, we have CPU, memory disk, and production cluster also we have. So instead of going for a no host cluster, we'll start discussing on management cluster 1 and production cluster 1. These two hosts we can discuss because we have a resources only in a management cluster 1 and production cluster 1. So when I select the management cluster 1, just expand here, you will see only one ESXi host running on a management cluster 1. But in the DRS configuration, not only one ESXi host, we need a minimally two or more than two ESXi host is needed to configure a DRS. So this ESXi4, if you want to move it to the our production cluster 01, if I expand production cluster 01, we have 3 ESX hosts. Just to avoid confusion, I'm just removing the other clusters. For our testing purpose only, I created. Let's remove test and development cluster. We'll create it later. And again, I'm removing the production cluster 2 because no ESXi host. And the management cluster also, if you want to move this ESXi host to production, if you want to move one host to production also, the procedure is right click the host, place the host into maintenance mode first. When you place the host into maintenance mode, the host is in a maintenance mode state. Just drag and drop it to the host. This is the one way to add the host, or else you can just move it to the data center first. So if you see here, management cluster currently there is no ESXi host on a management host level. So now you can right click the management host, delete. Okay, and we have only the production cluster 1. Within this production cluster 1, our host is one host is in the outside of the cluster. If you want to move, drag and drop or right click here and you can use a add host method. Okay, I'm just drag and drop this host to production cluster 1. So while dragging and drop, it clearly says that put all the host virtual machines in a cluster's root resource pool. Okay, cluster is also considered as a root resource pool. Okay, now click on OK. When you click on OK in the recent task, you can see cluster adding is in progress, or you can see from monitor and you can go to the task section. You will see the information for this host. Even the host is already added here. So if I select the production cluster 1, go to the host tab, we have totally 4 ESXi hosts, ESX1, 2, 3, and ESX4 is in a maintenance mode. Let's remove the host from maintenance mode, exit maintenance mode. So now within my production cluster 1, I have a 4 ESXi host. Okay, this warning messages safely ignore because our ESX is a nested environment. That is why we are getting some warning messages, safely ignore. Even if you want to clear that, that message is showing some virtual switch information. So safely ignore these warnings. And ESX4, currently there is no warnings for ESX4. And the power on virtual machines, even if you want to power on this current virtual machine, while powering on, we can see the cluster where it will power on. Suppose the VDIM, currently it is running on 4, and VRA also running on ESX4, and LCM also running on ESX4. Let's try to power on this 3 VM. How it will power on using DRS? Select the VM, click on power on. So when you power on, VM is starting powering on same host. Let's say try to power on the ESX4. VRA1 also power on, and LCM VM also power on. You can right click the VM power on or just click on a power on button. So 3 virtual machines are powered on. We'll quickly observe whether these VMs are still run on a same ESXi host or it will migrate to another ESX host. Because our ESX1, IDM1, VRA1 and LCM require more CPU and memory resources. If you notice our ESX4 CPU memory disk storage information, within few minutes, see the CPU memory usage will start increasing because we powered on 3 virtual machine, the resource usage will be increased. So booting is in progress. Once the booting is complete, your ESX4 usage will become high. See, when you see the ESX4, see the CPU is completely utilizing because we powered on 3 virtual machines. Even memory also, earlier it was memory is low. You can see CPU is resource crunch. Even memory also resource crunch. Okay, so resource is completely high on ESX4. But usually using when we have a DRS feature is turned on in our cluster level, it will automatically migrate the VM to another host. But in the ESX4 scenario, still my CPU is overutilized, but it is not yet migrated to another host. The reason is to configure a DRS cluster, the another recommendation is all our virtual machines must run on a shared data store. But for ESXi4, for our testing purpose, I haven't configured any shared data store. If you have a shared data store, then only these VMs automatically migrate to another host. This condition we know we have a feature called Vsphere vMotion feature. So during the vMotion, one of the main condition is all our production VMs must run on a shared data store. If your virtual machine is running on local data store, still if you want to migrate the VM, that can be only manual migration with the DV switch feature. If you have a DV switch, we can do only manual migration, but automatic migration will not possible. Okay, so that is the reason the host is still showing as CPU is high usage, red color, and memory is like it's normal usage only. Okay, now until now we understand that how to enable a DRS feature. Let's talk about the another point now. DRS use cases, we just now observe the initial placement, load balancing technique, and maintenance method. Now we are going to talk about the DRS enhancements. So can I continue now or shall we take a short break?
Continue.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. So we'll talk about the DRS enhancements now. What is the enhancements in DRS? So DRS enhancements are, we have a enhancements, we can also call it as improved DRS. So compared with our previous releases means ESX 6.0, ESX 6.5, 6.7, 7.0 update 1. Until the update 1, the DRS is working in these three functionalities. But from ESX 7.0 update 1 onwards, update 2, update 3, VMware has improved some features in a DRS. So let's try to understand these features. So these features are, earlier DRS is mainly a cluster central, and also DRS will run automatically, fully automatically in the backend for every 5 minutes. This 5 minutes time now reduced to 1 minute. And previous it is a cluster specific host level load balancing it will take care. But in the latest version of vSphere features, DRS is like a not cluster centric, it's a workload central feature. Workload means it's a our production virtual machines. So virtual machines level itself, whenever any virtual machine is required additional resources, we no need to bother. DRS will migrate automatically to another ESXi host wherever the resources are available. And earlier, DRS uses a cluster-wide standard deviation model. Standard deviation model means whenever any ESX require additional resources, so it will move VMs to another host only in the cluster-wide deviation only. But when comes to the latest version, DRS is uses a DRS score concept. Like our score is like our college days or school days marks scores. Even DRS also uses some scores. If the VM score is 80 to 100% means it's a merit student. So the virtual machine is required is have enough resources. It's in the green color. Suppose the resources are 0 to 20% or below the 40%. That means it's a less resource. It require a additional score. It's not in the enough score, additional score. That means there is a resource crunch in a 0 to 40% stage. During that score, DRS will initiate automatic migration. But in the previous versions, it will migrate based on the ESX host CPU memory usage. But in the latest version, not only in the host level, it will work within a VM level also. Even any one virtual machine require a additional resources, it will immediately migrate it to the another host. Okay, that same point I highlighted here based on granted memory. And also the additional feature in DRS is scalable shares. So it will be scalable shares feature is available used by default for vSphere with Kubernetes. So this is also one of the vSphere advanced feature, vSphere with Kubernetes. Just understand this point. In our later classes, I explain in detail of vSphere with Kubernetes feature. So this scalable shares option is available in DRS. That option is mainly used by default for Vsphere with Kubernetes, where namespace is equal to resource pool. Even resource pool concept also I will explain in a later classes. This is a one of the key concept for DRS improvements, or we can say enhancements. And another enhancements continuation topic. See DRS course, as we discussed, if you see the right side diagram, 80 to 100% means it's in the normal situation. There is some situation, one VM will be in the neutral condition, 40 to 60%, and two VMs are running in a 20 to 40%. So 20 to 40% means there is a resource contention or resource conflict. It requires some additional resources. Immediately DRS will migrate it to the another ESX host using the based on the virtual machine score. So same points I highlighted in the description. So virtual machine DRS score in buckets. So buckets means it's like a 0 to 20% one bucket, 20 to 40% one bucket, and so on until the 80 to 100%. So lower bucket score not necessarily means VM is not running properly. So if it is lower percentage means it's not like a VM not running properly. It's requiring some additional resources. It's about the execution efficiency of VM. So values closer to 0%. So closer to 0 to 20% indicate severe resource contention. So resource contention means it's like a wait time or require more resources, or else let's talk about some example. What is importance of resource contention? Let's say if you went to a restaurant with your family, let's say already when you visit the restaurant there is a one dining table. In the dining table it's a 10 seats dining table. Okay, so one couple is visited the dining table. So when the couple is visited at the first time, so our restaurant guys they given the seat as a 10 table dining seat, but the couple is only two members, they sit it at the 10 seats dining table. That means the remaining 8 seats are empty and the couple can easily use the dining table. That is one scenario. Let's say the same time another family, a family with the 10 members. So 10-member family visited the restaurant. When the 10 members they're trying to have a dining table, our restaurant guys say currently this seat is occupied by couple. So we have to wait for some time to occupy the 10 seats. So there is a some contention. That means there is a some wait time. we need to inform to our 10-member family members, wait for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Once the couple left from the table, they can occupy the 10 seats. That is called resource contention. Even in the ESXi host level also, ESX host running with the 10 virtual machine, out of 10 virtual machine, one virtual machine need a additional memory, additional CPU, but there is no additional CPU, additional memory. There is a resource contention. So that VM needs to be wait for a few seconds. Our DRS will migrate this VM to the another host wherever the resources are available. Like restaurant example also, the couple is already having the 10 seats table. The restaurant guy, they will ask them the 10 members family members to wait for some time, or they will arrange the another table to allocate the 10 seats. So same scenario in a ESXi host VM level also. So contention is nothing but a wait time, the resource wait time, or the resource conflict time. When we're planning to occupy the complete CPU memory resources, there is a some wait time. So during that time, DRS will take care of all the migrations. So value closer to 0%, like 0 to 20 or 20 to 40%, there is a resource crunch. It requires additional resources. That time, DRS will initiate a automatic migration. This is in a latest concept of vSphere 7 update 1 onwards. But in the previous scenario, DRS will work like a host level only. Whenever any ESXi host over 80%, it will randomly pick one VM and it will migrate. But in the latest concept, not only in the host level, it will but also applicable on a VM layer also. Even any virtual machine, one virtual machine require additional resources, we no need to bother. DRS will take care wherever the host, but the only thing is conditions apply. The conditions are, we require a shared storage and we require a additional ESXi host. Suppose in our lab concept, I already have a 4 ESXi host, but ESXi 4 CPU is over high utilization, but it's still the VM is not migrated. Only thing is the condition to store all your virtual machines in a shared data store. But in our lab ESXi host, we do not have a shared data store enough free space. That's why I copied on a local data store. But if you meet the conditions, DRS will take care of automatic migrations. That is a point here. And the value closer to 100%. That means 80 to 100%, 60 to 100%. It indicate mild to no resource contention. There is no resource contention. It have a enough score. It is in a normal situation of resource utilization. And VM DRS score is calculated using the following items. So it is kind of CPU ready time, memory swap, CPU cache behavior, headroom for workload to burst. That means the workload means virtual machine is required yes, some immediately need yes, some resources or migration cost. These are all the items considered to arrange a DRS score. But where we can see the DRS score option is log into the vCenter. When we log into DRS vCenter server, we know cluster feature enabling on a cluster configure tab DRS enable the DRS feature. But to verify the DRS core option, we have to go to the monitor section. Within the monitor section, look for a DRS tab. We have a multiple tabs, issues and alarms, task and event performance. There is a tab for a DRS. Under the DRS, if you expand DRS, you can see the option for virtual machine DRS score. So this is the new feature. You didn't find this feature in a previous releases of VMware version 6 series, 6.7, 6.5. This option is only available from a 7 update 1 onwards. Okay, virtual machine DRS score. This is also one of the interview question. What is a new enhancements in DRS? Interviewer may ask. That time you can highlight this DRS score point. Okay. So the currently the what is the DRS scores in our virtual machine, the CPU, memory and all running. The score information it is showing as normal only. The percentage you can see here, DRS score percentage. It is 86 percentage means it is in a healthy condition, 50 also healthy condition. If you see the IDM and LCM, the health is not healthy. It is 0 to 5%, 0 to 7%. But if you want to migrate DRS automatically, we doesn't meet the conditions. LCM and IDM VM are need to be run on a shared storage. Then only it will migrate automatically. So we doesn't meet the condition. That's why it is still the score is showing as lower score. Okay, DRS score section. Even if you click here, it will segregate with a high to low. The high one is it's a normal condition, 51 also normal, and 7 and 5% means DRS is score is not healthy situation. Okay, hope you understand this point, DRS score point. And now we'll talk about another DRS feature, which is DPM, distributed power management. This is also one of the key feature when your resources are underutilized. Either it is overutilized also, it's a challenge, it's a issue, and even less utilization. That means, let's say I invested 10 ESX servers. Out of 10 ESX server, one of my ESX is completely underutilized. Why I need to spend a lot of money on my ESX and even CPU, memory, disk, and NIC, and ESXi host also, we will get the some power bill monthly basis. Even if you want to save your power bill also, when the ESX host is underutilized, we no need to bother. If you enable a DPM feature, it will take care of whenever any ESX host is underutilized, that underutilized host, DPM will place the host into a power off mode. We no need to power off manually, DPM will power off. Point I will explain now. Vsphere Dpm Overview. If you see in this diagram, we have three ESXi hosts, and out of three ESXi hosts, ESX1 is in a standby host, and 2 and 3 is in a power optimized service. These three in a completely using one host. There is no enough resources. Immediately Vsphere DRS will migrate VMs to another host. Then DPM will take care of make this host into a standby host, and it will shut down. The point is highlighted the same point here. DRS also includes the DPM feature, which allows for host to be evacuated. Evacuated means emptied and power off during the period of low utilization. Low utilization, or we call it as a underutilization. Okay. The same point we'll try to explain using a DRS architectural example. DPM architectural example. Sorry. See, DPM architectural example. Let's say if you see the DPM architecture, let's talk about the right side diagram. If you see ESX1, we have 4 virtual machine, and ESX2 is 3 virtual machine, 3 is a 2 VMs. But that means ESX2 and 3 completely underutilized. What DPM will take care is, it will move ESX3 one VM to ESX2 and another VM to ESX1. The ESX3 will become as a completely empty. Empty means the resources are completely underutilized. It will automatically make this ESXi host to standby host. Okay, so if you see the left side architecture, it is completely imbalanced. The resource migration is taken care by DRS. To shut down your unnecessary ESXi host is taken care by DPM. So DPM means distributed power management. The same concept I explain in the description. See, DPM generates migration recommendation like a DRS, but in terms of achieving power savings. If you want to save the power on underutilized host, you can enable the DPM feature. So it can be configured for how aggressively we want to save the power. And also, for instance, the three ESXi hosts on the left side, the following figure have a virtual machine running, but they're mostly ideal. So there will be a three ESXi hosts, but the resources are ideal. DPM determines that given load of the entire environment, shutting down the host 3 will not impact the level of performance of the virtual machine. The virtual machine performance also DPM will analyze, and the DPM migrates virtual machine from host 3 to, and it will migrate to host 2 1 VM and host 1 VM. And finally, it places the host 3 into a standby mode. On the right side of the diagram, the power managed configuration of host is appears. So this is the host is considered as a standby host. This is how DPM will work. Now we'll talk about where this DPM feature is we can verify. Log into our lab system. We know how to enable the DRS. So go to the configuration tab. We can click on edit and we can enable the DRS. Now we'll talk about all the DRS configuration points one by one. Within the DRS, the power management also separate tab. We can see the DPM feature here. So before going to the DPM, we'll talk about these points also one by one. When we enable this DRS, see there will be 4 options: DRS automation, DRS additional options, power management, and advanced options. We need to understand all these 4 options. Even any option, if you want to modify also, you can just click on edit and modify those 4 options. Okay. So before modify, we'll just talk about, before going to the power management tab, we'll talk about automation tab, additional options, and advanced options. In our DRS option, DRS feature, when we see the automation tab, we have a automation level. As I mentioned, automation, we have a three types of automation: manual, partial automated, fully automated. The name itself, it clearly says manual means we have to migrate the virtual machines manually. No, vMotion will not work automatically. We have to migrate manually. But you may ask the question, why we use this feature? This feature will use when you are doing some maintenance on your cluster level. Let's say in my cluster, I have 4 ESX hosts, ESX 1, 2, 3, 4. You want to do some maintenance on ESX4. While doing the maintenance, DRS will may take the automatic migration, keep on doing vMotion migration every minute. But in the previous versions, every 5 minutes will do automatic migrations. But in the latest version, it will migrate VMs every 1 minute. So during that scenario, if you want to avoid the DRS migrations for some time, you can change the setting to either manual or partial automatic. Or else the default recommend option is always change it to the fully automatic. Okay. And migration threshold also, we have two options: less frequent vMotions, more frequent vMotions. Suppose any customer say every time, every 1 minute VMs is migrating, keep on migrating, I don't want to migrate every VM for every 1 minute. During that scenario, the migration threshold, you can set it as a conservative mode or aggressive mode. Conservative means less frequent vMotion, aggressive means more frequent vMotion. So that time you can just use this menu. You can put in a 1 star or you can put in a 2 star. You can see the number is 2, and even you can put the number as a 3 or 4 star or 5 star. So this is convenience. What is the speed of your migration you want to set, or you can use a default option 3. Okay, so 3 is the default setting. If you want to modify migration speed also, we can modify. Okay. And predictive DRS. Even predictive DRS is like a, we are anticipating DRS when to migrate and all. This predictive DRS option we can enable only if you are using a vRealize Operation Manager tool. Okay, this predictive DRS I will explain in detail during the VROps concept, vRealize Operations Manager. This is one of the VMware monitoring tool. Okay, when you want to verify your predictive DRS through the Operations Manager, this option must be enabled. Okay, or else the predictive DRS feature will not show in our monitoring tool. And virtual machine automation, even we know about virtual machine DRS score. That DRS score will also, it will applicable when you enable this option. Suppose when you disable that option, it won't work. Okay, so override individual virtual machine can set from the virtual machine override page. Even if you want to do modification on virtual machines automation feature, you can enable here, click on OK. And this feature, they are saying that you can modify the override options using monitor tab. If you go to the monitor tab, there is a look for a virtual machine overrides. Any feature for virtual machine overrides here. In the score level, we can modify. What is the point they are saying here is individual virtual machine automation level enabled, and we can modify from override page. Yeah, VM overrides. Under the configuration, VM overrides. Even if you want to modify some virtual machine scorings manually for individual VMs, you can do it through the overrides. Okay, and
When we use override like VM overrides.
when we can use the overrides is, suppose, for example, one of the virtual machine, let's say in our ESX4, my virtual machine, if I go to the virtual machines tab, if you see here, within my 3 virtual machines, one virtual machine is continuously consuming the high memory. Let's observe from the DRS scores, monitor DRS score, virtual machine DRS score. See, this virtual machine, VRA virtual machine is close to 62. That means it is in the healthy condition. If the virtual machine score is 0 to 4%, it is a already DRS score is enabled. It is showing as a unhealthy situation or imbalanced situation. DRS has to modify the migration from this ESXi host to another ESX host. So this scenario, if you want to stop the migration, you can use a override option. Suppose if I want to add this VM to the override, how we can add the override is go to the host and clusters, configuration tab, VM overrides, click on add, you can choose any VM to select as a override. It is a subjected to be customer's choice. Most of the time, any VM, you don't want to change your CPU and memory at present, or you don't want to migrate the VM from one host to another host at present. During that scenario, go to the override. It will show you all your list of VMs. Whatever the VM you want to protect from a migration, or you don't want to keep on migrate this VM, just select this VM name, let's say LCM VM, click on next. And during this migration, see, you can able to modify the restart priority, either for your HA settings and DRS automation setting. Either if you want to do fully automatic, you can migrate, or you can disable the migration. Okay, there are some scenarios customers say, I don't want this VM keep on migrate, I want to disable this migration feature only for one VM. During that time only we'll use this override feature. So I repeat again, go to the configure VM override, right side, click on add, and you can see the list of VMs. Whatever the VM you want to stop the vMotion, manual VM, automatic vMotion, just select the particular virtual machine, click on next. Under DRS automation level, default automation level is fully automated. But the customer says he don't want the virtual machine keep on migrate. So then you can change the setting to manual, or you can change the setting to disable. But if you set the setting to disable, means it won't allow you to migrate also, but better to set it to a manual. That means whenever is necessary, we can do a manual migration, or else we can, when you uncheck the override, it will always be fully automated. Fully automated means automatically migrate using DRS feature. Is it clear?
Yes, clear. But to keep a VM in one host, we have to use the affinity rule, right?
Yeah, for that
Then,
affinity rule, yeah, in the above the VM overrides tab, there is another tab called VM and host rules. So these rules we can configure. I For one VM, I want to keep on a only one ESXi host, or I want to keep my three virtual machines in a three different ESXi host. The VM rules is applicable for a multiple virtual machines. Multiple virtual machine, either you can configure on a affinity rule or anti-affinity rule. Affinity rule means it will always, suppose if I select the host rule, click on add. When you click on add, we have the rule mainly to see keep virtual machines together. That means I have a active directory, primary active directory, secondary active directory, AD1, AD2. My active directory VMs, we always recommend to keep it on a separate virtual machines. I don't want to keep my AD1, AD2 on a together, because whenever host down, there is a downtime for my AD1 and AD2 VMs. During the AD1 and AD2 scenario, we choose the rule as a separate virtual machine rule. And application VMs, sometime application app 1 and app 2, application 1 VM, application 2 VM, some of the application vendors recommend to keep those two application VMs on a together. During that scenario, we'll use for a VM rule. So for the VM override and host rule, the scenarios will be slightly different. For only the migration perspective, we'll use a override, and for a multiple group of virtual machines, the scenarios are four scenarios. One scenario is keep virtual machines together, and second scenario separate virtual machines like primary DC, secondary DC, and virtual machine to host, only which host you want to use. Normally for Linux virtual machines, there is a Linux virtual machines licenses based on the ESXi host CPU count. So during that scenario, all your Linux virtual machines recommend to keep either one or two ESXi hosts. During that scenario, we'll use a third rule. And fourth rule, virtual machines to virtual machines. That means within this virtual machine ranges, you want to do migrations. And that time we'll choose a fourth rule. Okay, this rule concept also will use depends on the customer scenario and applications requirements. Is it clear?
yes, what I have understood is like two are used to like control DRS only, but the scenarios are different, right?
Scenarios are different.
Okay, thank
Okay. Thank you. Now let's back to the DRS tab again. Under configure, select DRS. We are reviewing these four options: DRS automation, additional options, power management, and advanced options. So until now, we discussed about the automation level. Default, it's set as a fully automated. And migration threshold, we have a priority 1, 2, 3. The default recommendation is priority 3. This is for a migration speed. vMotion, how frequently it will migrate or how less frequently it will migrate. And predictive DRS, it require only using a vRealize operations feature. And virtual machine automation, it is also we can configure the automation in a individual VM level. Even DRS, this VMware overrides. In the interviews, they will ask the question. Let's say in my ESXi host, I have a 4 virtual machine, but one of the virtual machine, I don't want to migrate automatically. I want to migrate manually. How I can edit a specific VM level migration? During that scenario, we'll go for a override. Okay, that is the answer we have to give. If you want to modify virtual machine migration option on a specific VM level, use VM overrides. And the second scenario, I have a 2 virtual machines. Let's say IDM means Identity Manager, VRA is our vRealize automation, and LCM is Lifecycle Man. These 3 VMs are a same VRA related VMs. These 3 VMs, I recommend to configure these 3 VMs on a different 3 ESXi hosts. I don't want to run on a same host. Reason is when my ESX1 is down, my VRA 3 VMs also down. There is a minimal impact. Even though if I configure high availability, minimal impact is 99.9% available, but 0.1% there is a impact. I don't want that impact. During that scenario, our customer may recommend that these 3 VMs are same application, VRA related application. Better to configure these 3 VMs in a different ESXi host. So during that scenario, we can use a DRS affinity and anti-affinity rules. So affinity and anti-affinity rule, during this situation, you can choose separate virtual machine rule. Okay, you can just click on add and separate virtual machine. Present, I'm not going to configure. Reason is we do not have a shared storage for these 3 VMs. But if you enable that rule, it will configure immediately. Or else you can just use the rule as a keep virtual machine together just for our testing. I'm click on add, keep virtual machine together. I am choosing a VRA VMs, LCM, VRA, and IDM, Identity Manager. Click on OK. Now this rule, we have to keep one rule. I just mentioned the rule as a VRA VMs, VRA VMs rule. Now click on OK. When we configure this one, the rule is created. The VMs are running on a, always these VMs keep together. That means these 3 VMs running on a same ESXi host. Okay. If you want to modify this rule, again, same option, go to the cluster, configure tab, VM and host rules, select this rule and click on edit. And in the edit option, if you want to remove, you can remove. And even if you want to change the any rule settings, just uncheck, change the rule settings. Okay, remove all this from this rule and you can add special rule to modify the rule type. Anything we can do in the rule level changes. Okay. If there is any conflicts also, it will shows the conflicts also. That is importance of DRS affinity and anti-affinity rules. Affinity rule means it's like a keep virtual machine together, and anti-affinity means separate the virtual machines. Now we'll talk about the DRS remaining tabs. These remaining tabs, you can verify from here or just click on edit. When you click on edit, you can see automation level, migration threshold, predictive DRS, and virtual machine override. This override option. Now we understand how we can modify the virtual machine level automation. Now come to the second tab, additional options. These additional options are virtual machine distribution. So how we can distribute the virtual machine? Enforce even the distribution of virtual machine across the host in a cluster for availability. May see a decrease of DRS when utilizing this setting. So VMware also not recommending. Just uncheck this option. So CPU over commitment. Even if you want to overcommit your CPU ratio, you can enable this feature. And the scalable shares. This point I highlighted today. The scalable shares enable scalable shares for resource pools on a cluster. Normally remember that this scalable feature is used only in a vSphere with Kubernetes option. Let's go back to our previous slide. See here I highlighted. Scalable shares are used by default for vSphere with Kubernetes. Okay, during the vSphere with Kubernetes scenario, I will explain in detail the scalable shares. Okay, this scalable shares also default feature. If you want to enable, you can just enable. Okay, but currently we haven't configured the Kubernetes. When we configure Kubernetes, I will show you the importance of scalable shares. Now come to the DPM, power management option. See DPM, when you click on information icon, you will see DPM uses a wake on LAN, IPM, ILO and all. So normally when you want to configure a DPM feature in your ESXi host level or physical host level, it use a management interfaces. Like for HP server, we'll have a integrated light source ILO, and for some other vendors they will use a IPMI IP. IPMI means IP address management interface. So using the IPMI only we can control and it will power on power off the ESXi host. Okay, but this is also recommended when you have a more number of ESXi hosts. Any few ESXi hosts are underutilized, that time you can just enable this feature. It will take care of automatic shutdown of underutilized ESXi hosts. And this feature also, when you enable, you can set two options, either manual or automatic. Suppose if you want to stop your frequent power of ESXi host issue, you can set to manual or you can set to automatic. It's subjected to be customer's choice. Even the power on less frequent vMotions and all also, you can set the priorities. Default priority is 3. You can set it to the priority 1 or priority 2, 3, 4 or 5. Any priority you can set. Okay. So normally we'll leave it as a default options in the most of the scenarios. Okay. Until unless if customer asks, we can change the priority. This is about the distributed power management option. Now come to the advanced options. In the advanced options, normally if you want to set any of the specific rules or anything, you can set using a advanced options. Any parameters configurations also we can do using advanced options. Now let me cancel and you can see the all options in a descriptive manner here, and any modifications you can go to edit and modify. This is about the main DRS configuration settings. And also another key point for DRS is overrides, also one important to modify the migration methods for VM level. And if you want to set a group of virtual machines, if you want to set affinity and anti-affinity rules, you can set using VM level and host level. Until now we discussed about the VM rule affinity. There are some scenarios for host level rules also. Host level rule, let me give one example for host level rules. For example, ESX1, ESX2, ESX3. These three are, we know in our lab, we created as a nested ESX. That means ESX1, 2, 3 are running on our virtual machine only. We configured a ESX. I want to group these three ESX in a separate rule, and another fourth ESX is a actual physical ESX host. I want to configure a host rule. This is our lab level example. But in the real time scenario, in our physical host also, CPU have a different family of CPU. Intel CPU, AMD CPU. For Intel host, you want to keep one cluster, or you want to group Intel hosts in a one group, you can create, or AMD host one group, you can create. That is one scenario. And second scenario is within Intel CPU also, there is a different type of processor types. Processor also have a Intel Intel Gold, Intel Platinum, CPU Gold, CPU Platinum, and CPU Bronze. Three types of processors. For example, let's type in the Google Intel CPU Gold, Silver, and Bronze. Even the processors also, there is a different type of processor families. For example, I just type in the Google. Yeah, we'll took the random image. See in the icon, it is showing as brand image. Yeah. See, there is a one image directly from Intel website. Let me open image in the new tab. See, if you see this image, we have a images. There is a three images. One is Intel Xeon Gold, Intel Xeon process Silver, and Intel Xeon Bronze. So if you normally, if you observe, the gold means the performance is great performance, silver means good performance, and bronze means it is like a entry level performance. Suppose my customer recommend that all my production VMs should create only on a Intel Gold host. So there all your production VMs running, and all your development VMs you can create one rule for a gold silver process, sorry, silver processor, it will provide a good performance. All your test VMs you can configure on a Intel Xeon Bronze. But this host rules we can configure if we have a ESXi host with a different configuration of ESX host. If your ESXi host all in a same configuration, we no need to prepare a host level rules. Okay, so that one also I will just show you how to create a host level rules. Not only VM level rule, we can configure on a host level rules also. So just click on add, and here before enabling the rules, see this listed virtual machine must be run on same host. This is for a same host level. Present ESXi host level it is not showing. Let me look for a host level rule. When I select the host level virtual machine to host, we can create a VM group and we can create a host group. Okay, so in the host group, let enable this rule, because our this is a test ESX. If you have a original configuration host, the rules will be automatically enabled. Okay, but the scenario is what I explained, the same scenario. Based on your processor models also, we can segregate a host level rules. Okay, so let's back to the same console and go to the DRS tab, click on edit. So we observe the automation, additional options, power management, and advanced option. And also in addition, we verified the importance of VM overrides. We verified the importance of VM level rules as well as the host level rules. Okay, and now DRS and DPM, we verified the configuration part. Even the same DRS DPM, you can also verify from a summary tab. When you go to the summary tab, you can see data center name. In the right side, you can see a DRS core information. See DRS core, there is one VM already running with a less resources. That less resources VM is our LCM VM only. CPU is consuming high. Even if you select the SX4 summary tab, our CPU memory, both hosts consuming high CPU, high memory, but unfortunately we do not have a shared storage. If we have a shared storage, this DRS will take care of automatic migration. Okay, uh, now back to the summary tab. 40 to 60% means DRS score is normal, and 80 to 100% means it's a completely healthy configuration. Okay, and score you can find here. Even the DRS cluster service health is healthy, and any additional configuration information you will find from the summary tab also. Okay, even EVC mode is also enabled on this cluster. Okay, cluster resources EVC mode enabled. Now let's back to the slide. So we discussed about DRS improvements. We discussed about DRS core and power management, where we can enable the power management feature, the importance of power management feature. Now we'll talk about the last topic, which is vSphere clustering services. So vSphere clustering services, in short form, we call it as vCLS. This vCLS also, if I log into our vCenter, when you select the cluster, go to the virtual machine tab. See, there is a 3 VMs. We haven't created these 3 VMs. It's come automatically. The name is starts with vCLS, vSphere Cluster Service VMs. Even when I select each host, every host it's distributed one VM here. So here one VM, another host also one VM. Okay, this vCLS importance we'll discuss now. Okay, how that VMs are created, what is importance of vSphere clustering service VMs. If we see our vSphere clustering services, the distributing the cluster services within our vCenter server, our cluster have main two features are HA, high availability, and DRS. The challenge here is many vSphere services depend on a vCenter only. So vCenter is being available in order to operate any service. If you want to run, our vCenter is the main critical part. And solution, separate the distributed control plane components of vSphere clustering services. First step of many in a good direction. This vSphere clustering service feature is started from vSphere 7 update on 1 onwards. Okay, previous editions we do not have this feature. So if you see here vCenter ESXi, vCenter only taking care of HA and DRS. Just to reduce some load on the vCenter level, VMware introduced the feature called vCLS control plan. This control plan, how it will run is minimally every cluster runs with a 3 virtual machines. Okay, these 3 virtual machines, small footprint. Small footprint means the configuration of virtual machines, these three virtual machines configuration is minimally one CPU, 2 GB of RAM and 2 GB of disk, very minimal size. And this VMs we call it as a agent VMs. This vCLs agent VMs, and present VMware recently introduced this feature. This vCLs VM supported only for a DRS at present. Maybe in future, this vCLs may also provide support for a other vCenter features. Even if you see in our master spreadsheet, within the vCenter, we have a plenty of features. All the features is working effectively using vCenter services only. Just to avoid the load on the vCenter server, VMware introduced the feature called vCLs. It's helpful for a within a DRS level. Okay, even within DRS, we have one sub feature is DPM. To within DRS DPM also, to provide the separate traffic, they introduced the feature called vCLS, vSphere Clustering Services Control Plane. It comes with a default 3 virtual machines. Okay, the same thing we observed in our lab system also. If I select the cluster, production cluster, go to VMs tab. These three VMs we are not created. It's automatically created from vCenter itself. When we create a new cluster, these three VMs will create. But present out of three VMs, two VMs are power on, one VM is in power off state. This power on, power off also, it's not our job. vCenter will take care automatically. And the configuration also provisioned size, very minimal size, approximately 2 GB. And the CPU memory also very minimum footprint. Suppose if I select here, let's say select one virtual machine. The CPU memory for here is one CPU, and memory also very minimum memory. See, memory is also close to 1 GB. 1 GB memory, 0.13 means close to 1 GB or less than 1 GB. And the hard disk size also only 2 GB hard disk. So this is we are not creating, even it's they mentioned the point here. vSphere cluster service VM is required to maintain of health of your vSphere cluster services. This is the key point. The main point is the vSphere cluster health is taken care by cluster service, and the power state resource of this VM managed by vSphere cluster. So we no need to bother about this power on, power off and all. It is managed by vSphere cluster services. Okay, so VMware clearly given the information point for this one. So same point I highlighted here, the separate distributed control plane, components of vSphere clustering services. So first step of many in good direction. Many in good direction means maybe in future the same agent VMs may support for other features also. The same points, some elaborative points I highlighted in the following slide. See, vSphere clustering services overview. Solving the cluster services without vCenter availability. vCLS starts 3 virtual machines per cluster. There are a Photon OS only. So inside Photon is one of the open source. So VMware developed some new codes on the Photon OS. They make it as a vCLS VM. And the first step in the right direction, DRS first in a 7.7.0 update 1 onwards, and other services will follow in future. So they are also saying that in future they may use this control VMs for a other features also, but no way to disable. So we do not have recommendation to disable this vCLS. Let's let it run in our vCenter. Whenever you see vCLS, just ignore. It's a default configuration by vCenter server. So when DRS is enabled, the agent VMs are required. So the agent VM main part is when enable a DRS. This feature will be enabled by default to all vSphere customers. When they upgrade to 7.1, it will come by default. And when do fresh deployment, even if you when you do a fresh VSX vSphere environment 7. Update 1 or update 2 or update 3, any latest version, if you do a fresh deployment also, these three VMs will come automatically. Okay, so the same, these three VMs use cases I explained here. The use cases, the mainly whatever we discuss, it's supported for a HA, DRS, all the features it's supported. And these VMs can be differentiated using APIs, application program interfaces, and should be ignored from partner solutions. If any of your partner asked us these VMs to be disabled, we no need to disable, it can be safely ignorable. And the clusters home lab. See, we verified the first lab. We know how to create a cluster and enabling a DRS feature, and modify DRS setting also we verified. To modify the DRS setting, just log into the vCenter, go to the host and clusters, and configure tab, edit option. Whatever we edit, these all the settings can be modified. And add the host to cluster. We added the host also today. We added previously our ESX4 is in a different cluster. We removed from that cluster and we added to production cluster. And verify vMotion configuration. So vMotion configurations we already familiar. We should meet a few conditions for vMotion. All the ESX should be same name, fully qualified name. We have a VM kernel port group. We already familiar with the vMotion conditions. Okay, and DRS score and rules. So we discussed about the DRS score, what is the score values and all, and also the DRS rules we discussed. We discussed about DRS rules, affinity and anti-affinity rules. These rules can be applied on a virtual machine level or you can apply on a ESXi host level. It depends on a customer scenarios. Sometimes it depends on a host CPU level scenario, or sometimes it depends on a application scenario. If you have a group of 10 virtual machines, those 10 virtual machines you don't want to run on a same host. That time you can create a keep virtual machines separate rule. Okay, and validate vSphere DRS cluster functionality. The cluster functionality we can verify from a summary tab, how the effectively the DRS cluster is running. Okay, so hope you understand the cluster, DRS feature, and also the score and rules options. So that's it for today. If you have any questions, let me know before we end the session. Okay, it seems no questions. So thanks for your time. So please practice the DRS also in your lab. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.